My son Greg thought he was a big shot CEO. He treated me like a dirty secret, hiding me away when his rich friends came over. He forgot one thing: I control the family trust that funds his business. Today I'm not just his mother. I'm his new boss. And I'm about to fire him. Honey, sit down for this one because it is going to make your blood boil. Before it makes your heart sing. We all know that money talks, but sometimes it lies. I have seen children who would sell their own souls for a shiny car. And I have seen mothers who give everything until they are hollowed out. This story is about a woman named Eleanor. She was the kind of woman who wore sensible shoes and drove a 10-year-old sedan. But she had a secret that could buy and sell her whole neighborhood. She thought she was raising a son. It turns out she was raising a shark. This is how it started. The smell of roasted garlic and expensive perfume was thick in the air that Friday evening. My name is Eleanor, and I was standing in the kitchen of the house I had paid for, trying to stay out of the way. I was cutting up lemons for the iced tea because that is what I do. I make myself useful. But in this house, useful was not enough. You had to be decorative. My daughter-in-law, Tara, swept into the room like a hurricane in 6-inch heels. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. She stopped dead when she saw me. Her eyes raked over my beige cardigan and my comfortable slacks, like I was a stain on her marble countertop. "Greg," she hissed without taking her eyes off me. "Greg, come in here right now." My son walked in from the dining room, adjusting his silk tie. He looked handsome. He looked like his father used to look before the cancer took him. But his eyes were different. They were shifting and nervous. "What is it, babe?" he asked. "Look at her," Tara said, pointing a manicured finger at me. "We have the CEO of Oakhaven Capital coming in 20 minutes. We have investors coming who control millions. And she is standing here looking like the help." I put the knife down slowly. The lemon juice stung a paper cut on my thumb, but I did not flinch. "Excuse me, Tara," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am just helping with the drinks. I can go to my room if you prefer." Tara laughed, but it was a cold, sharp sound like glass breaking. "Your room," she said. "You mean the guest suite on the main floor, right off the dining room?" "No way. The bathroom door creaks, you cough. Last time we entertained, you walked out to get a glass of water in your nightgown and humiliated us. We cannot risk it tonight. This deal is too big." I looked at Greg, waiting for him to step in, waiting for him to say that this was his mother, the woman who paid for his college, the woman who silently funded the startup capital for his company when the banks laughed at him. But Greg just rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom," he said softly, not meeting my gaze, "it is a really big night for us. We just need everything to be perfect. The vibe has to be right. Young, successful, modern." I felt a coldness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "And I am not modern?" I asked. "I am just old furniture to you." Greg winced. "Don't be dramatic, Mom," he said. "We just need you to be scarce for a few hours." Tara tapped her foot impatiently. "We need the guest suite for coats," she announced. "And the upstairs bathroom is for the ladies. So we moved your things." I blinked. "You moved my things? Where?" Greg finally looked at me, and I saw the shame in his eyes. But it was not enough to stop him. He pointed toward the heavy oak door at the back of the pantry, the one that led downstairs. "We set up a nice cot for you in the basement unit," Greg said. "It is just for tonight. Just until the guests leave. It is private down there, you will be comfortable." The basement was not a unit. It was an unfinished storage space with concrete floors and a single small window near the ceiling. It was where we kept the holiday decorations and the broken exercise equipment. It was damp, it was cold, and it was exactly where they thought I belonged. I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I had rocked to sleep when he had fevers. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. Greg, I said, my voice trembling just a little. You are asking me to hide in the cellar like a dog? Mom, please, Greg begged, lowering his voice. Don't make a scene. Tara is already stressed out. If this dinner goes well, we are set for life. Just do this for me, just this once. Tara stepped closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. Unless you want to go to a hotel, she said with a fake smile. But I know you are on a fixed income, Eleanor. Hotels are expensive. We are just trying to save you money. The insult slapped me harder than a hand. She thought I was poor. She thought I was dependent on them. I had spent so years playing the part of the modest widow because I wanted them to build their own character. I wanted Greg to work for his success, not just wait for me to die. I realized in that moment that I had made a terrible mistake. I had hidden my strength so well that they thought I was weak. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and folded it neatly on the counter. I did not scream, I did not cry. I just nodded. Okay, I said. If that is what you need. Relief washed over Greg's face. Thanks, Mom. You are the best. I will come get you as soon as the last car leaves, I promise. He opened the pantry door for me. I walked past him, smelling his expensive cologne. I walked past Tara, who was already checking her reflection in the microwave door. I stepped onto the wooden stairs that led down into the dark. I heard the door click shut behind me. Then I heard the lock turn. The sound of that lock turning was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't a heavy clank like a prison door. It was a small, polite click. But it echoed inside my head like a gunshot. I stood there on the bottom step for a long minute, just staring at the wood grain of the door. My hand was still resting on the railing. I was not afraid of the dark. I was not afraid of the cold, damp smell of the concrete. I was afraid of the rage that was starting to heat up my blood. It was a quiet rage, the kind that burns slow and hot. I walked down the rest of the steps. They had put a cot in the corner near the water heater, a thin camping mattress with a sleeping bag thrown over it. Next to it was a bottle of water and a plastic cup. Like I was a hamster. Like I was a pet they were boarding for the weekend. I sat down on the edge of the cot. The springs creaked. I looked around at the boxes stacked against the wall. Cardboard boxes labeled Christmas and ski gear and college textbooks. I recognized the handwriting on them. It was mine. I had packed those boxes. I had paid for the ski trips. I had bought those textbooks. And now I was sitting next to them in the dark while my son poured wine upstairs. Bought with money he didn't even know I gave him. The ceiling of the basement was unfinished. Just exposed beams and pipes. That was their mistake. They forgot that sound travels down. I could hear the sharp click of Tara's heels on the hardwood floor above me. I could hear the doorbell ring, a heavy chime that vibrated the dust on the beams. Then came the voices, deep laughter, the clinking of glasses, the smooth practice tone Greg used when he was trying to sell something. I leaned back against the cold concrete wall and closed my eyes. I tried to pray. I tried to tell myself to be humble, to offer this up as a sacrifice for peace. But then I heard it. The footsteps stopped right above my head. It must have been the kitchen or the pantry area. The floorboards creaked. Is she secured? It was Tara's voice, low and sharp. Yeah, I locked it, Greg sounded breathless. I feel bad, Tara. It is freezing down there. Maybe I should go give her a blanket. Do not you dare, Tara hissed. If you open that door, she will come up here and start talking about her coupons or her arthritis and ruin everything. We need these investors to think you come from power, Greg. Not from that. I know Greg's side, but she is still my mom. She is a liability, Tara snapped. And listen to me. After tonight, we need to talk about the next step. I spoke to the doctor. My eyes snapped open. The dark basement suddenly felt very sharp and clear. Doctor? I hadn't seen a doctor in 6 months, and I was as healthy as a horse. What did he say? Greg asked. He said that at her age, confusion is common, Tara said. Her voice dropped lower, but I held my breath and I heard every syllable. If we can document that she is becoming forgetful, wandering into rooms, hiding in basements, we can build a case for competency. Competency? Greg sounded nervous. You mean like power of attorney? I mean control, Greg, Tara said. Real control. If she is declared incompetent, the trust has to appoint a guardian. That guardian would be you. We wouldn't have to wait for her to dole out allowances anymore. We would control the assets. We could finally buy the vacation house in Aspen. We could fix the cash flow issues at the company without begging her for loans. I don't know, Tara, Greg mumbled. That seems extreme. What is extreme is living like this, she shot back. Waiting for crumbs. She is old, Greg. She doesn't need the money, we do. Just get through tonight. Seal the deal with the investors. And tomorrow we start documenting her decline. The footsteps moved away. The laughter resumed. I sat there in the dark, and I felt the last drop of motherly guilt evaporate from my body. They weren't just embarrassed by me. They were plotting against me. They were going to paint me as senile. They were going to take the freedom I had worked 40 years to build. My hand went to my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It wasn't the jitterbug phone with the big buttons that Tara insisted I use. It was the latest smartphone fully encrypted, which I kept for my business dealings. The screen lit up the dark corner of the basement. I swiped the screen and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once. Eleanor? The voice on the other end was gruff. It was my brother Stan. He was retired from the FBI, but he still practiced law just to keep his teeth sharp. Why are you whispering? Is everything okay? No, Stan, I said. My voice was steady, cold. I am in the basement. The basement? Did the furnace go out? No, I said. Greg locked me in. They are upstairs entertaining the board of directors for Oakhaven Capital. And Stan, I just heard them discussing how to have me declared incompetent so they can seize the trust. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A dangerous silence. Stan was protective. He was the one who beat up the bullies for me in grade school. He locked you in? Stan asked very quietly. Like a prisoner? Like a dog, I corrected. Stan, I am done. The coddling is over. Say the word L, Stan said. I can be there in 20 minutes with a crowbar and the sheriff. No, I said. No, sheriff, not yet. I don't want to just escape. I want to ruin him. Who is at the party? You said Oakhaven Capital? Stan asked. I could hear him typing on a keyboard. That is the merger deal Greg has been bragging about. He needs their injection of cash by Monday, or his company misses payroll. He is leveraged to the hilt, Eleanor. I know, I said. I own the note on his bridge loan. I bought it through the shell company last week. Right, Stan chuckled darkly. He thinks he is borrowing from a faceless bank. He is borrowing from Mommy. Stan, I said. Call Oakhaven. Call the senior partner. Tell him the majority shareholder of Greg's debt is invoking the immediate repayment clause. Tonight? Stan asked. Tonight, I said. While he is eating his steak. And Stan, bring the spare key to the back door. I am coming upstairs. I am on my way, Stan said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the pathetic cot. I looked at the plastic cup of water. I stood up and smoothed down my beige cardigan. They wanted a senile old woman. I would give them a show they would never forget. You know, they say patience is a virtue. But after 60 years on this earth, I have learned that patience is actually a weapon. If you wait long enough, people will tell you exactly who they are. You just have to be quiet enough to hear them. And sitting there in that damp basement, staring at a stack of old magazines and a rusted water heater, I was very, very quiet. The floorboards above me were thin. It was an old house. One of those sturdy colonials my husband and I bought back in the 80s when the neighborhood was just trees and hope. We raised Greg here. I knew every squeak of the timber. Right now, the squeaks were telling me a story. I heard the heavy, confident footsteps of the investors arriving, men who walked like they owned the ground they stepped on. I heard Tara's high-pitched, breathless laugh, the one she practiced in the mirror. She was charming them, pouring the $50 wine, playing the part of the perfect hostess in a house she didn't pay for on dishes she didn't buy. "Welcome, Mr. Sterling," I heard Greg's voice boom. It was his CEO voice. Deep, projected, completely fake. "So glad you could make it. Please come in. Let me take your coat. This is our humble abode." Humble? The chandelier in that foyer cost more than my first 3 cars combined. "It's a magnificent property, Greg," a new voice rumbled. "Mr. Sterling." The man holding the checkbook that Greg was desperate for. Old money charm, I like that. Shows stability. You don't see that much in tech startups these days. Absolutely, Greg lied smoothly. My family has been in this house for generations. I actually restored most of the woodwork myself. I gripped the edge of the cot until my knuckles turned white. Restored it himself? The only thing Greg had ever restored was his golf handicap. I paid 3 master carpenters $40,000 to fix that woodwork while Greg was partying in Ibiza. But I sat there. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "And your mother?" Mr. Sterling asked politely. "I recall you mentioning she lives with you? I'd love to pay my respects. I have a soft spot for the matriarchs." The silence that followed lasted only a second, but it felt like an hour. I looked up at the ceiling, challenging my son with my mind to tell the truth. "Tell him I'm downstairs," I thought. "Tell him you locked me in the cellar." "Oh, Mother," Greg laughed, a nervous, dismissive sound. "She's actually away at her retreat in Sedona this week. She gets confused, you know how it is. Needs a lot of specialized quiet time. We try to keep her environment very calm. She doesn't handle excitement well." "A retreat," Mr. Sterling said. "Well, good for her." "Yes," Tara chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It's tragic, really. The dementia comes and goes. But we manage. We take care of everything. The finances, the estate. It's all on Greg's shoulders now. That was the match in the powder keg. Dementia. They were building the narrative in real time. They weren't just locking me away for the night. They were planting the seeds to bury me legally." My hand shook as I reached for my phone again. But before I could unlock it, a shadow moved across the small basement window well. I froze. The window was high up, ground level with the backyard. I saw a pair of polished loafers step into the window well. Then the distinct scratching sound of a key in the exterior bulkhead door. The heavy metal doors that led out to the garden. I stood up, smoothing my cardigan. I didn't know if Greg had sent a guard, or if a caterer was coming for supplies. The metal doors groaned open. Cool night air rushed in, smelling of rain and wet grass. A figure descended the concrete steps, backlit by the garden security lights. He moved with a stiffness that came from age, but with a speed that came from fury. It was Stan. My brother didn't just walk into the basement. He stormed in like a tactical unit of one. He was wearing his old trench coat over a suit, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. His face was red, his jaw set so tight I thought his teeth might crack. He saw me standing there next to the water heater, surrounded by dusty boxes, with a plastic cup of water on a folding chair. He stopped. He looked at the cot. He looked at the locked door at the top of the stairs. Then he looked at me. His eyes welled up just for a second, before turning into cold hard steel. I'm going to kill him, Stan said. His voice wasn't a shout, it was a growl. I am going to walk up those stairs and I am going to throw that boy through the bay window. No, I said firmly. You aren't. Eleanor, look at this. Stan gestured around the damp room. You are the founder of Greystone Logistics. You are a woman of dignity. And he has you in a dungeon? While he drinks your wine. He started toward the interior stairs, rolling up his sleeves. I'm getting the sheriff. This is unlawful imprisonment. This is elder abuse. Stan, stop. I grabbed his arm. He was strong, but I was his big sister. He stopped. If you call the sheriff, I said, my voice low and precise. Greg goes to jail for a night. He gets bailed out. It becomes a family dispute. A mess. The neighbors talk. I look like a victim. You are a victim, Stan snapped. No, I corrected him. I was a victim 10 minutes ago. Now I am a creditor. I held out my hand. Did you bring the tablet? Stan paused, his chest heaving. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw that I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was calculating. He let out a long, ragged breath and reached into his satchel. He pulled out my iPad. I accessed the shell company accounts on the way over, Stan said, his lawyer voice kicking in. I pulled the loan documents. The promissory note Greg signed 3 years ago to float his company. It's a demand note, Eleanor. Callable at any time by the lender. I took the tablet. The screen glowed blue in the dim light. I swiped through the documents. There it was. The Jupiter Group, the anonymous LLC I had created to lend Greg $2 million when no bank would touch him. He thought the Jupiter Group was some faceless hedge fund in Delaware. He didn't know Jupiter was the name of the dog we had when he was 6. He missed a payment last month, Stan noted. Technically, he's in default already. You don't even need to give him 30 days. And the collateral? I asked, scrolling down. Everything, Stan said grimly. His company stock. His personal assets. And Stan pointed to the bottom of page 4. The deed to this house. He put the house up to secure the business loan because he thought he owned it. He owns the mortgage, I said. I paid the down payment. Doesn't matter, Stan said. The lien is perfected. If you call this loan right now and he can't pay the $2 million in full. You own Oakhaven Capital. You own the furniture he's sitting on. You own the shirt on his back. I looked up at the ceiling. I could hear the muffled sound of applause. Greg must have just finished his toast. He was probably raising a glass, feeling like the king of the world. Mr. Sterling is upstairs, I told Stan. The CEO of Oakhaven's biggest potential investor. Stan's eyebrows shot up. If you drop this hammer while Sterling is in the room. Greg is finished. No investor touches a CEO who is being foreclosed on during dessert. I looked at the save button on the screen. It was a digital execution. One tap, and my son's life as he knew it was over. I hesitated just for a heartbeat. I remembered the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. Then I heard Tara's voice drift down through the floorboards again. Oh, don't worry about the noise downstairs, she was saying. It's just the old plumbing. The pipes groan when they get too old. We're planning to rip it all out next month anyway. Gut the whole basement. The pipes? She called me the pipes. I looked at Stan. Do I look like plumbing to you, Stanley? Stan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You look like the demolition crew. Good, I said. I tapped the screen. Execute. I watched the little spinning wheel on the screen turn 3 times before a green checkmark appeared. Sent. The demand letter had been delivered to Greg's secure email, his work email, and the automated system at his company. Somewhere in the cloud, algorithms were already freezing his credit lines. It was silent, invisible violence, the kind corporate men understand best. It is done, I whispered. Stan nodded, shoving his hands into his trench coat pockets. Then let's get you out of this hole. We didn't bang on the locked door at the top of the stairs. I wasn't going to give Tara the satisfaction of hearing me plead to be let out of my own pantry. Instead, we turned and walked out the way Stan had come in, through the heavy bulkhead doors, and up the concrete steps into the backyard. The night air was crisp and smelled of rain. My garden, the one I had planted bulb by bulb 30 years ago, was lit up with fairy lights that Tara had strung in the trees. Through the large bay windows of the dining room, I could see them. It was like watching a movie of my own life, only I had been edited out of the script. I saw Greg standing at the head of the table, holding a crystal flute of champagne. He was laughing, his head thrown back, his teeth shining white in the chandelier light. Tara was next to him, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder, whispering something into the ear of Mr. Sterling. They looked like royalty. They looked untouchable. Look at them, Stan muttered, standing beside me in the damp grass. They have no idea the roof just caved in. Not yet, I said, smoothing my hair. But they will. We walked around the side of the house, to the front driveway. It was lined with luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, a Bentley. My 10-year-old sedan was nowhere to be seen. They must have parked it down the street to keep it from ruining the aesthetic. I walked up the front steps, the same steps where I had taken pictures of Greg for his prom, for his graduation. My key was still on my ring. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I simply slid my key into the lock and turned it. The foyer was warm and smelled of roasted lamb and expensive candles. The chatter from the dining room was loud, a hum of polite, wealthy conversation. Stan stayed a step behind me, his presence a silent threat. I walked toward the archway of the dining room. My beige cardigan was wrinkled. My shoes were sensible. I had no makeup on. I looked exactly like what Tara said I was, a tired old woman. But I didn't feel tired. I felt like a Category 5 hurricane. Just as I reached the edge of the rug, a loud ping echoed through the room. It was the specific piercing chime of a priority notification on a phone. Then another ping. Then a third. Inside the dining room, the laughter faltered slightly. Sorry, Greg's voice floated out. Usually I ignore phones at dinner, but that is the emergency line for the business. Let me just check. There was a pause. A silence that stretched thin. Then the sound of a glass shattering. It wasn't a toast, it was a drop. I stepped into the archway. Greg was staring at his phone, his face the color of old ash. Shards of crystal lay on the floor near his feet, champagne soaking into the Persian rug. Tara was staring at him, annoyed. Greg, she hissed, keeping her voice low but sharp. What are you doing? You're frightening the guests. Greg didn't answer her. He looked up. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at the billion-dollar investor sitting to his right. He looked straight at the doorway, straight at me. His eyes were wide, terrified circles. He looked at me and he didn't see his mother. He saw the name on the email he had just read. The Jupiter Group. Mom, he whispered. The word came out like a strangled choke. The entire table turned. Mr. Sterling. There is a special kind of silence that happens when a lie dies in public. It isn't peaceful. It sucks the air right out of the room. You could hear the hum of the wine fridge and the terrified breathing of my son. The guests, men in $5,000 suits, and women with Botox so fresh they couldn't frown, were frozen with their forks halfway to their mouths. Tara, bless her heart, was the only one still trying to keep the play going. After the curtain had fallen, she let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Oh, Eleanor, she said, shaking her head like I was a toddler who had drawn on the walls. Listen to you. Majority owner? You really are confused tonight. Greg, honey, help me guide her back to the guest room before she hurts herself. She reached for me again, her grip tighter this time. Her nails dug into my forearm through the cardigan. Walk, she whispered through her teeth so low only I could hear. Walk or I will drag you. I didn't pull away, I didn't struggle. I just looked at Stan, who was standing in the archway, cleaning his glasses on his tie. Stanley, I said calmly, would you please hand Mr. Sterling the tablet? Stan stepped forward. He didn't look like a lawyer right then. He looked like an executioner in a trench coat. He walked past Tara like she was invisible and placed the glowing iPad directly onto the charger plate in front of Mr. Sterling. What is this? Sterling asked, his voice gravelly. He picked up the device. That, I said, stepping out of Tara's grip, is the foreclosure notice on the bridge loan that was funding this dinner party. Tara spun around. Foreclosure? What are you talking about? Greg, tell them she's crazy. But Greg couldn't speak. He was staring at his phone screen, scrolling frantically. His face was wet with sweat. Jupiter, he muttered. The Jupiter Group. That's right, I said. Greg looked up at me, his eyes red. Jupiter. That was the name of our golden retriever. When I was 6. He was a good dog, I said softly. Loyal. He never bit the hand that fed him. Unlike some. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. It was a loud, authoritative sound. Greg, he said, this document says that a company called the Jupiter Group has called in a $2 million demand note. It says your assets are frozen effective immediately. Is this true? It's a mistake, Greg stammered. I can fix it. I just need to make a call. You can't make a call, Greg, I interrupted, because I'm the one who answers the phone. I walked over to the head of the table. Greg was sitting in my husband's chair. I looked down at him. Get up. Mom, he pleaded. Not here, please. Get up. Greg scrambled out of the chair like it was on fire. I didn't sit in it. I just placed my hands on the mahogany backrest, claiming it. Mr. Sterling, I said, addressing the room. I apologize for the interruption. My son led you to believe that Oakhaven Capital was a solvent company backed by institutional investors. The truth is, Oakhaven is funded entirely by a shell company, managed by his mother, a mother he locked in a basement 40 minutes ago, so she wouldn't embarrass him in front of you. A gasp went around the table. One of the wives covered her mouth. Tara stormed up to me. Her face was blotchy with rage. You liar. We never locked you in. You went down there to look for boxes. She turned to the guests. She is senile. She hallucinates persecution. Greg, called the police. We don't need to call them, Stan said from the doorway. He held up his phone. I already texted the sheriff. He's on his way. But not for Eleanor. Mr. Sterling stood up. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and threw it on the table. Greg, he said, his voice cold as ice. I don't like being lied to. And I certainly don't do business with men who lock their mothers in cellars. No, wait. Tara grabbed Sterling's arm. You can't leave. The deal is dead, Sterling barked, shaking her off. He looked at me and nodded, a small respectful dip of his chin. Ma'am, my apologies. Accepted, I said. Sterling motioned to his team. Let's go. The scraping of chairs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The guests stood up in unison, grabbing purses and phones, avoiding eye contact with Greg and Tara. They flowed out of the dining room like water, leaving the two pretenders standing in the wreckage of their social climb. When the front door finally clicked shut behind the last guest, the silence returned. But this time it was heavy, dangerous. Tara turned slowly to face me. Her eyes were manic. Do you have any idea what you just did? She screamed. You just cost us millions. You jealous, bitter old hag. Tara, Greg warned weakly. Stop. No. She spun on him. Look at her. She ruined us on purpose. Because she couldn't stand not being the center of attention. She grabbed a crystal wine glass from the table and hurled it at the wall. It shattered near Stan's head. Stan didn't even blink. I didn't ruin you, Tara, I said calmly. I just stopped paying for the costume. I walked over to the sideboard and picked up the bottle of wine they had been drinking, a 2015 Cabernet, my favorite year. You see, I continued. You wanted the lifestyle of an heiress without the work. You wanted the manor house, but you didn't want the woman who built it. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. You are now completely independent of me. What does that mean? Greg asked, his voice shaking. It means I'm firing you, Greg, I said. As CEO of Oakhaven, as manager of the trust, and as a resident of this house. Greg stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Fired. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. He blinked rapidly, his eyes darting from me to Stan, to the spilled wine on the floor. You can't fire me, he stammered. I founded Oakhaven. It is my company. My name is on the door. Your name is on the door, I agreed, stepping closer to him. But my money is in the walls. My money is in the servers. My money pays the lease. And when you default on a loan secured by 100% of your shares, the lender steps in. I am the lender, Greg. I own 51% of your life. As of this evening. Tara let out a screech that sounded like a cat getting its tail stepped on. This is illegal. She yelled. You can't just steal a company because you are mad about a basement. We will sue you. My father knows lawyers. Stan laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. Your father is a dentist in Jersey, Tara. He said, not even looking up from his iPad. And unless he specializes in corporate litigation and hostile takeovers, I suggest you save the long-distance charges. The paperwork is ironclad. Eleanor didn't steal the company. Greg gave it to her. He signed the collateral agreement 3 years ago. Page 10, paragraph 4. In the event of default, ownership reverts to the creditor. Greg slumped against the dining table. The fight went out of him all at once. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. He didn't see the checkbook anymore. He saw the mother he had betrayed. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. Why would you do this to me? I didn't do it to you, I said softly. I did it for you. Because you have forgotten who you are. You think being a man means wearing a suit and bullying your mother. You think success is something you can fake. I pointed to the basement door. You locked me in a cellar, Greg. You treated me like a stray dog to impress people who don't even like you. I am stripping you down because it is the only way to make you build yourself back up properly. This is insane, Tara muttered. She was typing furiously on her phone now. I am not staying here to be lectured by a senile woman and her failed cop brother. Greg, tell her to fix this. Tell her to give it back or we are leaving. Greg looked at his wife. He looked for the support she always promised him. He looked for the power couple partnership she talked about on Instagram. What he found was a woman checking her Uber app. Tara? Greg asked. You are leaving? I am going to the Four Seasons, she snapped without looking up. I am not sleeping in a house that is being foreclosed on. It is depressing. And frankly, your mother is terrifying. But my cards are frozen, Greg said, his face pale. I can't pay for a hotel. Tara froze. Her thumbs hovered over the screen. She looked at Greg like he was a piece of fish that had gone bad in the sun. The disgust on her face was so pure it was almost impressive. You are broke? She asked. The accounts, Greg mumbled. She froze the business accounts. That is where I draw my salary. That is where the credit cards link to. Tara slowly lowered her phone. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Stan. She just looked at her husband with cold, dead eyes. So you have nothing, she stated. No company, no house, no money. I have potential, Greg tried, sounding pathetic even to his own ears. We can fix this, babe. We just need to talk to her. Tara laughed. There is no we, Greg. I married a CEO. I didn't marry a man who lives in his mommy's basement. She grabbed her purse from the chair. I am calling my dad. Do not follow me. She turned on her heel and marched toward the front door. The clicking of her heels was the only sound in the house. Tara, Greg shouted, taking a step after her. Tara, wait. Let her go, I said sharply. Greg stopped. He turned back to me, tears streaming down his face. She is my wife, Mom. She is a parasite, Greg, I said. And the host just ran out of blood. The front door slammed shut. The vibration rattled the crystal in the china cabinet. Greg stood alone in the middle of the dining room. The silence was deafening. He looked small. He looked like he was 6 years old again and had just dropped an ice cream cone. What happens now? He whispered. Now, I said, walking over to the window to watch Tara's taillights disappear down the driveway. You learn a hard lesson. Stan cleared his throat. The sheriff is pulling up Eleanor. I saw the blue lights flash against the oak trees in the front yard. Greg's eyes went wide with panic. You called the cops? On me? No, I said. Stan called them to enforce a peace order and to supervise the eviction. Eviction? Greg choked out. Tonight? You gave me a cot in the basement, Greg. I said, my voice hard as granite. I am giving you the courtesy of the front door. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag. The officers will escort you off the property. You can't stay here tonight. But where will I go? He cried. I have no money, you froze it all. I reached into the pocket of my beige cardigan. I pulled out a crumpled $20 bill and placed it on the dining table next to the spilled wine. There is a Motel 6 on the highway, I said. They leave the light on. It is more than you left for me. Greg stared at the money. Then he stared at me. He saw no wavering. He saw no soft landing. He saw the Iron Lady of Greystone Logistics. Go pack, Greg, I said. The sheriff doesn't like to wait. My son turned and walked slowly toward the stairs. He didn't run. He dragged his feet. I listened to his heavy steps going up to the master bedroom, the room that used to be mine. Stan walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. You okay, El? I looked at the $20 bill on the table. My heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces, but my spine was straight. No, Stan, I said. I am not okay, but I will be. I picked up the glass of water I had carried up from the basement and poured it into the nearest potted plant. Let's change the locks, I said. You know what the most dangerous drug in the world is? It isn't something you buy on a street corner. It is denial. Denial will have you waking up in a motel room that smells like stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner, telling yourself you are still a king. My son Greg woke up on Monday morning in that Motel 6 on the highway. He had $20 to his name and a suit he had slept in. But instead of calling a temp agency or apologizing to his mother, he put that wrinkled suit back on. He splashed cold water on his face and looked in the cracked mirror. He told himself it was all a misunderstanding. He told himself he was still the CEO of Oakhaven Capital. He told himself that once he got to the office he could spin this. He could move some money around, he could fix it. Bless his heart. He didn't know that while he was sleeping, I had been awake for 48 hours. And I had been very busy. I was already sitting in the conference room on the top floor when Greg's car pulled into the parking lot. I wasn't wearing my beige cardigan. I was wearing a navy blue power suit I hadn't touched since the 90s. It still fit. Tailored wool doesn't forget. I sat at the head of the long glass table. To my right was Stan. To my left were the 3 department heads of Greg's company. Sarah from accounting, David from sales, and Jessica from HR. They looked terrified. They had spent the last 3 years terrified of Greg's temper and Tara's demands. Now they were looking at me like I was the principal and they were in detention. So I said, folding my hands on the table, let's review the ledger. You are telling me that in the last fiscal year, $100,000 was billed to consulting fees for a firm called Terra Designs? Sarah from accounting swallowed hard. She adjusted her glasses. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Johnson said it was for office aesthetics. I looked around the room. It was glass and steel and cold gray carpet. Aesthetics, I repeated. And the $50,000 for client relations in Cabo San Lucas? That was a retreat, David whispered, for the executive team. But only Greg went, I noted looking at the receipt. And he took his wife. The room went silent. These people were good workers. They had families, they had mortgages. They had watched my son loot the company I funded to pay for his ego. They didn't hate the work. They hated the leadership. Stops today, I said firmly. The corporate credit cards are canceled. The lease on the luxury cars is terminated. We are going back to basics. If it doesn't make money, we don't spend money on it. Is that clear? They nodded. I saw something in Sarah's eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. That was when we heard the commotion in the lobby. The glass walls of the conference room looked out over the bullpen of cubicles. We all turned to see Greg storming through the front doors. He looked like a wreck. His shirt was untucked on one side. His hair was wild. He was swiping his keycard at the security gate over and over again. The light stayed red. Beep, beep, beep. Open the damn gate. He shouted at the receptionist. Poor old Mrs. Higgins, who had been with me since the start. She just shook her head and pointed to her screen. Greg didn't wait. He vaulted over the turnstile. He was athletic, I will give him that. But he landed heavy. He marched through the office, ignoring the stares of the employees. He walked straight to his office, the big corner one with the view. He grabbed the handle, locked. He spun around, his face purple. Who changed the codes? He screamed. This is my building. Open this door. Then he saw us, he saw me. He saw his mother sitting at the head of the boardroom table, surrounded by his staff. He froze. For a second he looked like he was going to run, but the denial was too strong. He straightened his tie, smoothed his hair, and walked into the conference room like he was late for a meeting he had called. Mom, he said, breathless. Uncle Stan, what are you doing here? We have work to do. Sarah, why is the security system locking me out? Fix it. Sarah didn't move. She looked at me. Sarah doesn't work for you anymore, Greg, I said. None of them do. The rest of that day was a blur of shredded paper and hard truths. You would think taking back a company is like winning a war, all flags and trumpets. But mostly it's just janitorial work. I spent 6 hours going through files that Greg had ignored. I found unpaid vendor invoices stuffed in drawers. I found a design plan for a private office sauna that cost more than my first house. Every piece of paper was another crack in the image my son had built. Stan stayed by my side, acting as legal counsel and coffee fetcher. By 4 p.m., the office was humming with a different kind of energy. Fear had left the building, replaced by the steady, quiet rhythm of work. People knew that the woman in the corner office wasn't going to yell at them for wearing the wrong brand of shoes. They knew I just wanted the job done. At 5 p.m., I packed up my briefcase, the old leather one I'd used since 1995. I walked out to the parking lot. My sensible sedan was parked right next to Greg's reserved spot. His spot was empty. He had left his luxury car keys on the conference table because the lease was in the company name. I assume he walked to the motel. Or maybe he hitchhiked. I didn't let myself wonder too long. If I started worrying about how he was getting around, I'd be right back to enabling him. I drove home. The drive felt different. The air felt cleaner. When I pulled into the driveway of the estate, the sun was starting to set, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. The sheriff's cruiser was gone. Tara's car was gone. The house stood silent and tall, waiting for me. I walked up the front steps and used my new key. The locksmith had come and gone while I was at the office. The click of the deadbolt was crisp and secure. I stepped inside. The house was exactly as they had left it the night of the party, but the energy had shifted. The broken wine glass had been swept up. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was peaceful. I walked into the dining room. I sat at the head of the table in the chair Greg had vacated. I looked out the bay window at the garden, where Stan had broken me out of the basement just 2 days ago. Felt like a lifetime. I wasn't a guest in my own home anymore. I wasn't the old furniture. I was the foundation. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom. I expected to feel sad seeing the space they had taken from me, but mostly I just felt annoyed. Tara had left the place a disaster. Clothes were flung everywhere, designer dresses she couldn't fit in her suitcase, shoes she didn't care enough to pack. It looked like a boutique had exploded. On the bedside table, I found a photo frame face down. I picked it up. It was a picture of Greg and Tara in Paris, looking glamorous and bored. I took the photo out of the frame, ripped it in half and dropped it in the trash can. Then I saw something underneath it. Piece of paper. It was a list, in Tara's handwriting. Goals for 2024. Aspen House, push Greg on the trust. New G-Wagon, trade in Eleanor's sedan. Nursing home options, look for budget-friendly facilities. I stared at that third item. Budget-friendly facilities. She wasn't just planning to take my money. She was planning to warehouse me in the cheapest hole she could find so she could drive a better car. A cold shiver went down my spine. I hadn't just taught my son a lesson. I had saved my own life. I walked over to the window that looked out over the driveway. I needed to breathe. I checked my watch. It was 5:55 p.m. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. I had given Greg an ultimatum. The night shift at the warehouse started at 6 p.m. It was a test, the ultimate test. If he showed up, it meant there was still something inside him worth saving. It meant he was willing to eat humble pie to survive. If he didn't show up, well, then I truly had lost him. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app for the warehouse. I had asked the shift manager, a good man named Miller, to keep an eye on the employee entrance. I watched the tiny screen. The feed showed the gray concrete loading dock. Men in work boots and safety vests were filing in, punching their time cards, laughing, smoking last-minute cigarettes. 5:58 p.m. No Greg. I felt a heavy stone settle in my stomach. Of course he wouldn't come. He was too proud. He was probably sitting in that motel room calling his frat buddies, trying to beg for a loan. He would rather starve than sweat. 5:59 p.m. The last few workers trickled in. The foreman was checking his clipboard, getting ready to close the bay doors. I closed my eyes. Okay, I told myself. You tried, you gave him a ladder. He chose not to climb it. I was about to close the app when I saw movement in the bottom corner of the screen. A figure walked into the frame. He wasn't wearing work boots. He was wearing expensive loafers that were covered in mud. He was wearing his suit trousers, but he had taken off the jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt. He looked out of place like a wedding guest lost in a construction zone. It was Greg. He stopped at the time clock. He looked around, confused, hesitant. He looked at the other men he used to look down on from his office window. They stared back at him. Nobody smiled. Greg took a deep breath. I could see his shoulders rise and fall even on the grainy video. He walked up to the foreman. They exchanged a few words. The foreman pointed to a stack of orange safety vests. Greg picked one up. He struggled with it for a second, putting it on over his dress shirt. It looked ridiculous, it looked beautiful. He punched the time clock. 6:01 p.m. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. A single tear rolled down my cheek, but I wiped it away before it could fall. He had shown up. He was at the bottom of the mountain, but he had started climbing. I turned off the phone. I looked around my empty, quiet, messy bedroom. There was a lot of cleaning up to do. There were piles of terrace trash to burn. There were lawyers to call. There was a company to rebuild. But for tonight, the work was done. I walked downstairs to the kitchen. I didn't go to the basement. I opened the fridge, took out the lemons I had cut on Friday, and made myself a glass of iced tea. I sat on my back porch, listened to the crickets, and took a long cold sip. It tasted like victory. They say time heals all wounds, but I say time just reveals how well you stitch them up. If you stitch a wound dirty, it gets infected. If you clean it out, even if it stings like fire, it heals strong. I had scrubbed my son's life clean with bleach and steel wool, and for the last 3 months I had been watching to see if the infection would come back. It was a Tuesday in November. The leaves were gone, and the air had that sharp bite that tells you winter is coming. I was in my office at Oakhaven, my office, reviewing the quarterly numbers. They were good. Not fake luxury retreat good, but bills paid and profit made good. The door opened and Stan walked in. He wasn't wearing his trench coat. He was wearing a sweater vest. He looked relaxed for the first time in years. "You got a letter," Stan said, tossing a thick envelope onto my desk. "From the future ex-Mrs. Johnson." "I didn't even pick it up, Tara." "Her lawyer," Stan corrected. "She's asking for a settlement. Alimony. Emotional distress. Something about being accustomed to a certain standard of living." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. She was accustomed to a standard of living provided by my savings account. "What did you tell them?" "I sent them the video," Stan grinned. "The one from the security camera in the basement. The one where she is heard discussing how to commit you to a state facility so she could buy a G-Wagon. I told her lawyer that if she filed a single motion, I would file criminal conspiracy charges before the ink was dry. And they withdrew the request 10 minutes ago," Stan said. "She's gone ill. She moved to Miami. Heard she found a plastic surgeon down there who needed a trophy. She's his problem now." I nodded. I felt a weight lift off my chest. The parasite was gone. But the host, my son, was still in recovery. "How is he?" I asked, looking down at the warehouse production reports. "Ask him yourself," Stan said, nodding toward the window that overlooked the loading dock. "He's on his break." I stood up and walked to the glass. Down below, sitting on a stack of pallets, was Greg. He looked different. The soft, puffy look of expensive scotch and lazy mornings was gone. His face was thinner, angular. His hair was shorter, no longer styled with $40 gel. He was wearing the orange safety vest and eating a sandwich out of a brown paper bag. He looked tired, but he looked real. "I'm going down there," I said. Stan raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You haven't spoken to him since the day you hired him." "It's time," I said. I walked down the metal stairs to the warehouse floor. The air smelled of cardboard and diesel. The other workers nodded at me. "Morning, Ms. Eleanor." Respectful but easy. I walked over to the loading dock. Greg didn't see me at first. He was staring at his boots, chewing slowly. When my shadow fell over him, he flinched like he expected to be yelled at. He looked up. His eyes were clear. "Miss Eleanor," he said, scrambling to stand up. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "I mean, Mom. Or, Boss? Mom is fine on break time," I said. I motioned for him to sit back down. I leaned against a forklift. "How is the work?" "It's hard," Greg admitted. He held out his hands. They were rough, calloused, with a healing cut on his thumb. "My back kills me. My feet throb. And Miller yells at me if I'm 30 seconds late." "Miller is a good foreman," I said. "He yells because safety matters." Greg nodded. He looked at his sandwich. I know. I used to make fun of him, you know? When I sat in the big office. I called him the grunt. Last week, the conveyor belt jammed and he pushed me out of the way before a crate crushed my hand. He saved my fingers. Greg swallowed hard. I was an idiot, Mom. Yes, I said simply. You were. He looked at me, searching for the anger, but the anger was gone. It had burned itself out, leaving only clarity. Tara filed for divorce, he said quietly. Finalized it yesterday. She didn't even ask for the dog. We didn't have a dog, but you know what I mean. She just wanted the money. When the money stopped, she stopped. I know, I said. Stan told me. I'm sorry, Greg whispered. I know I said it before. But I'm saying it now, sober and broke and tired. I am so sorry I let her treat you like that. I'm sorry I treated you like that. I looked at my son. He was 32 years old, but in many ways he was just growing up today. I forgive you, Greg, I said. His head snapped up. You do? I do, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean amnesia. You aren't moving back into the house. Greg let out a short, dry laugh. I didn't expect to. I'm renting a room. In a basement apartment, actually. Irony, right? Does it have a lock on the outside? I asked sharply. No, he smiled weakly. Just on the inside. Good. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the break. The other men started standing up, crushing their trash, putting their gloves back on. Greg stood up. He brushed the crumbs off his vest. He looked at me, and for a second I thought he was going to ask for a loan, or a promotion, or a shortcut. Hey, he said. I get paid on Friday. My first full check after the probation period. That's good, I said. I was wondering, he stammered, looking nervous. If you aren't busy, could I take you to dinner? Not at the Manor. Just a burger. At that diner on Main Street. My treat. I mean, really my treat. I earned the money. I looked at him. I saw the pride in his eyes. It wasn't the fake pride of a CEO title he didn't earn. It was the small, sturdy pride of a man who worked for his dollar. A burger sounds nice, I said. Friday at 6. I clock out at 6, he said. I'll be dirty. Wash your hands, I said. I don't mind the dirt. It's the pretense I can't stand. He smiled, a real smile. See you Friday, Mom. Get back to work, Greg, I said. Miller is watching. He turned and jogged back to the line, pulling on his gloves. I watched him go. I watched him lift a heavy box, his knees bending properly, his back straight, doing the work. I walked back up to my office. Stan was waiting. Well, Stan asked, Did you fire him? No, I said, sitting down in my chair and turning it to face the window. The sun was setting over the empire I had built, lost, and reclaimed. I think I just rehired him. As my son, I picked up the picture frame on my desk. It was an old one of me and Greg when he was 5, holding a dandelion. I had kept it in a drawer for months. I took a tissue, wiped the dust off the glass, and set it back on the desk where it belonged. The house was quiet when I got home that night. But it wasn't empty, it was full of peace. I poured a glass of wine, the cheap stuff because I actually prefer the taste, and sat in the living room. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't hiding from anyone. I was just Eleanor. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.